Because X-Force 21 is about to take you on an action-packed roller coaster. This issue is a perfect snapshot of the 90s era of comics. Big guns, bigger explosions, and even a random cameo at Cheers? But that's not all. This comic's legacy includes some serious character reveals and intense action that makes you want to know what happens next. The plot's fast-paced, the stakes are high, and it's full of unexpected twists, leaving you at the edge of your seat. So, what's really going on here? Grab your copy of X-Force 21 and let's dive deep into all the action, chaos, and even an exclusive quote from the writer himself. It's the 20th episode of the series. Let's dive in. This globe-trotting issue starts out in near-Earth orbit after Cable's old ship called Graymalkin suddenly appears. War Machine, S.H.I.E.L.D, and X-Force all race to get aboard and discover what is inside. This ultimately leads to a standoff and pitched battle between all three groups. As team exchange gunfire and explosions rattle the ship, its onboard artificial intelligence called Professor announces the ship is losing power and that a self-destruct sequence has begun. Professor teleports Sunspot and Cannonball to the bridge and tells them that they must begin jettisoning portions of the ship before the self-destruct sequence runs out. He says that there is only one other than Cable that can turn off the sequence. This person turns out to be Cannonball. S.H.I.E.L.D. continues to decide what they will do and if they should leave before the ship breaks apart or if they should try to salvage what they can. Cannonball and Sunspot continue to jettison portions of the ship to the Earth. They send the weapons depot and the cargo bay to their base in Camp Verde. They then learn that the Time Displacement Core is taking up the largest power, and they send it off to the deepest portions of the Pacific Ocean. As soon as they do, the Professor announces an alert and the ship explodes. Meanwhile, at Camp Verde, Siren, Boomer, and Warpath are surprised to find the rest of their team is missing. They search around the camp for them and are immediately met by a giant blast that knocks them unconscious as a menacing figure looms over them. Elsewhere, Domino and Grizzly are on the hunt for members of X-Force and arrive at the home of their own teammate, Hammer. They convince him to help them on their quest to keep Cable's legacy alive. Meanwhile, in Boston, a young mutant named Copycat heads out on the town with her friend Vanessa as twins. They head over to a bar in Boston that turns out to be the famous Cheers. They both order a drink from Sam and drink with the rest of the gang. Finally, in New Delhi, India, Deadpool is searching for information about Tolliver, aka Tyler Dayspring, aka Genesis, who has recently died. Deadpool threatens a local at one of Tolliver's old townhouses and receives the folder with information that Vanessa is in Massachusetts with her old roommate, Tina. This sets him on a path to hunt them both down. This story continues in X-Force number 22. Fabian Nicieza wrote this issue. Nicieza is best known for his work on Marvel titles such as X-Men and Cable, of which he helped create numerous characters, among them Deadpool, Domino, Shatterstar, and Silhouette. During this period, Nicieza wrote the first Cable miniseries, as well as the first few issues of the character's subsequent ongoing series. He also wrote the first solo Deadpool series that same year. 2 years after this issue, Nicieza and Marvel parted ways due to a dispute with Bob Harras over the future direction of X-Force. Speaking exclusively with Read the Freaking Comics, Nicieza talks about this issue. This was the first part of my run with Greg Capullo, where I think we were really cooking. Fun comics, but bittersweet, since I think at that point we knew Greg would be leaving with 25, so I wanted to enjoy my run with him as much as possible. Nicieza is referring to Gregory Capullo, who penciled this issue and the cover. Best known for his work on Quasar and Spawn, Capullo drew the DC company-wide crossover Dark Knight's Metal and Dark Knight's Death Metal. Capullo also co-created characters like The Batman Who Laughs, Mr. Bloom, and The Court of Owls. Inker Harry Candelario started his career as a penciler right out of the High School of Art and Design in New York City. He worked for various departments. Later he shifted to inking and worked for 13 years until focusing on web design. Marie Javins and Steve Buccellato both colored this issue. Javins started out as an intern at Marvel and Epic Comics. After graduation, she was hired as an editorial assistant and secretary for Mark Gruenwald. After a shakeup at Warner Media in August of 2020, she became the co-editor-in-chief at DC with Michelle R. Wells. In November 2020, Javins was named sole editor-in-chief of DC. Steve Buccellato is a freelance artist and self-publisher who has worked in the comics industry as a colorist, writer, penciler, and editor. Buccellato's work has been published by Marvel, DC, Image, Tokyopop, and Tibet House US, among others. He has also published his own work in the magazine Comic Culture. Chris Eliopoulos is known as a prolific letterer, in particular for hand-lettering the first 100 issues of the ongoing Savage Dragon series. Even after much of the comic book industry had come to rely on computer-generated fonts, Eliopoulos designed the fonts for Marvel's in-house computer lettering unit. He also contributed lettering work to Valiant, DC, and other publishers. During this period, Bob Harras was editor at Marvel Comics. Harras started his career at Marvel as an assistant for Ralph Macchio, where he worked on such titles as Dazzler and Micronauts. At this point in his career, Harras has also worked as writer on a number of comics, including a run on The Avengers, Nick Fury vs. S.H.I.E.L.D., and a brief run on Namor, the Submariner. This issue features a side story with Deadpool. However, many modern Deadpool fans may have trouble recognizing him. At his inception, Deadpool was a pretty generic villain under writers and creators Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza. This tone changed slightly after Liefeld left Marvel, but it wasn't until Joe Kelly's Deadpool miniseries where he started really pushing the silliness and portrayed the Deadpool series as a dark comedy where Deadpool was a goofy yet tragic character. Later, Gail Simone continued this trend when she took over the book. Daniel Way's Deadpool series, beginning with Secret Invasion, de-emphasized the tragic elements of the character and cranked up the goofiness, and became the template for the modern Deadpool that many fans know today. Some of the action in this issue takes place in Camp Verde, Arizona. This place holds some significance in the Marvel Universe, as it was here that John Proudstar first met Professor X when the latter tried to recruit him to become an X-Men. A ghost town at Camp Verde eventually became a temporary base of operations for X-Force, while hiding from the law. In reality, Camp Verde is a town in Yavapai County, Arizona, United States, with a population of less than 11,000 people. This issue has some significance as it reveals the real name of three mutants for the first time: Beatrice, also known as Domino, Theodore, known as Grizzly, and Eisenhower, known as Hammer. Tina and Vanessa both enter a bar in Boston called Cheers. This is the same bar depicted on the popular 1990s show Cheers. Graymalkin served as Cable's base of operations. The technology aboard the ship allowed Cable to train and operate his mercenary team with ease. The AI-powered computer system dubbed Professor had full control of every aspect of the ship. After the events of this issue, portions of Graymalkin that crashed into the Earth were later used to build Cable's island, Providence. Later on, it is learned that the entirety of Graymalkin was not destroyed at the end of this issue, and portions were once again recloaked by Professor. Upon learning this, Magneto boarded the base, disabled Professor, and using S.H.I.E.L.D. technology, used it as a base of his own, calling it Avalon. This issue has everything a 90s comic should have: mutants, violence, overly drawn female forms, massive shoulder pads, and gritted teeth galore. All joking aside, this issue is packed with no less than 5 separate storylines that will most likely come together in a cohesive whole, maybe, eventually. There's a lot to take in, and reading this issue out of context forced me to reread pages and try to decipher who each character was, because quite frankly, some of these guys look really similar. Seriously, what's with all the gritted teeth? Leaving the convoluted plot aside, this action-packed piece does work well. It keeps the plot moving, and you are genuinely curious as to how it will all turn out in the end. The final panel, where the entire ship exploding, is certainly enough to whet the appetite for the next issue. Spoiler: no one dies except a side character who wasn't even on the ship. The art here screams mid-90s with big guns, big uniforms, and big color. Greg Capullo pulls double duty as both penciler and cover artist, giving us some solid continuity. And with Marie Javins and Steve Bucoletto's colors, it is a big, bold comic. I have no idea why there's a Cheers cameo included. While the show was incredibly popular in 1993, it is obviously a dated reference. But what I want to know is Cheers Marvel canon, or is Marvel Cheers canon? The value of this X-Force comic has steadily increased since 2022. Off its highs of $54, a mint issue is currently worth $48 on PriceCharting.com. You can find some very fine issues on eBay for about $2.50. The comic sales bubble was at its peak in 1993, with a record number of comic books selling for a record number of dollars. Thousands of comic shops ordered tens of millions of comic books a month, peaking in April with 48 million comic books moved to the direct market. However, the crash was just around the corner, as many of these comic shops could not sell enough copies to sustain this type of growth. X-Force 21 was the 156th top-selling comic of the year. Only X-Force 20 and 25 sold more copies that year. Marvel was in complete domination that year with 38% of all sales. However, the top 5 selling comics of the year were all DC titles. 1993 saw a large expansion of new titles, tentpole storylines, and big moments in the Marvel Universe, including the first appearance of Ghost Rider 2099 in Punisher War Journal 50. Cable is released as a monthly title. Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man 200 Best of Enemies is released. The Maximum Carnage Spider-Man storyline begins. The conclusion to Infinity Trilogy is launched with Infinity Crusade. Deadpool #1 is released. The Fall from Grace storyline debuts in Daredevil 319. Reed Richards' Mr. Fantastic dies in Fantastic Four 381. Avengers West Coast #100 is released, featuring the 64-page anniversary issue and the shocking death of Mockingbird. Wolverine #75 represents a turning point in Wolverine's life as the adamantium is separated from his body by Magneto. The X-Men Fatal Attraction storyline concludes, only for Blood Ties to begin, and the Punisher debuts the Suicide Run storyline with issue #85. Additionally, some titles were cancelled at this time, including Clive Barker's Hellraiser at issue 20, Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. at 47, The Nam at 84, and Conan the Barbarian is cancelled with issue 275. Marvel was riding high in terms of comic sales, but they set their sights beyond comics and were diversifying their footprint into trading cards, video games, animation, and taking those first steps into feature films. In 1990, Marvel began selling Marvel Universe cards with trading card maker Skybox International. These were collectible trading cards that featured the characters and events of the Marvel Universe. Just a year earlier, in 1992, Marvel released the X-Men animated series, which was aired on Fox Kids. They later released Spider-Man the animated series on the network as well. In terms of video games, they released X-Men on Sega Genesis, The Punisher in arcade halls, and The Amazing Spider-Man 3 Invasion of the Spider Slayers for Nintendo Game Boy. Despite Marvel's expanding reach, not all was well in the house that Stan Lee built. Just a year earlier, in 1992, 7 of Marvel's prized artists, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Mark Silvestri, Eric Larson, Jim Valentino, Willis Portacio left to form Image Comics in a deal brokered by Malibu Comics owner Scott Mitchell Rosenberg. 1993 was also a turbulent year in publishing, with no less than 12 new publishers entering the market. Meanwhile, First Comics, Eclipse, Disney, Vortex, Innovation, Personality, and Comic Chronicles all ceased publishing that year. At this point in time, comics were still a safe bet to advertise to young, mostly male audiences. The ads in this issue speak to that. There are film, video game, and junk food ads throughout this issue. Paramount was promoting their sci-fi film Fire in the Sky, while Nintendo and Sega were fighting for attention with games. Nintendo ran a pro quarterback game for the Super Nintendo, while Sega was running ads for Flashback on the Genesis and Make My Video for the Sega CD. Make My Video is a series of 4 video games by Digital Pictures. These featured 4 musical groups: In Excess, Criss Cross, CNC Music Factory, and Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. The games included 3 songs from their respective musical groups, and the player edited pre-made clips to make a new music video. Players can change between video clips available by pressing the buttons on the controller, and choose from clips of videos of the group, stock footage, movie clips, and special effects. The games were panned by critics and were financial failures. Marvel was promoting the X-Men animated series, Video and Fleer their basketball card sets. Meanwhile, Mars ran an ad for Three Musketeers, and Franklin Crunch and Munch ran a clever cross-promotion ad, with Marvel offering exclusive trading cards inside. After extensive research, all I could find that these were drawn by a Marvel bullpen artist. If you know who the artist is, please comment below. This week, I wanted to find a comic shop as close to Camp Verde as possible. If you are ever in the Clarkdale region of Arizona, I highly recommend you check out Stardust Books, located at 907 Main Street in Clarkdale, Arizona, or check them out on Instagram at Stardust Bookseller. Thanks for checking out this video. If you want to see more, please hit like and subscribe. If you have suggestions for comics you want me to deep dive into, please leave a comment below. Please help and support real artists. AI is great for a lot of things, but not for creating art and replacing artists. Thank you.